Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good evening, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. I also hope you're all cozy and settled in, because tonight I'm going to tell you about the nefarious Professor P's nefarious plans, which took me a while to uncover, but I got there in the end. What to do about them was another matter, however. As you remember, I was on a real rescue mission in the fake ancient temple ruins on the nefarious Professor P's hidden fake volcanic island lair, and I had to create a code based on cryptanalysis and random symbol generation, and put it all into a side channel attack with my custom umbrella number 4, the CPU umbrella, to open a digitally locked door. It took a number of days, and while I was successful, some of the elements of the challenge, like a conveniently accessible USB port right by the locked door, seemed a bit too convenient. Maybe it was an oversight by the minion foreman, and maybe it wasn't. Professor P had kidnapped my assistant Bradley and his girlfriend/mercenary Delores from their vacation in Niagara Falls and stashed them away in a kidnappee lounge in the fake temple ruins on the other side of the island. That's who was behind the digitally locked door full of random symbols. And this ended up being the third science challenge, which was computer engineering and hacking, and I'll be honest, it wasn't my strongest area of expertise. I wondered if Professor P knew that, and maybe there were some hints and assists along the way. Whether these were from my ex-wife Julia, who was now the new girlfriend of Professor P, or from Professor P himself, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know at the time. Now, I did. More on that later. Oh, and yes, I'm still having a difficult time processing the fact that my ex-wife was now the girlfriend of my evil science nemesis. But my position on that had softened recently, as more of the pieces of this puzzle fell into place, and more on that later as well. To recap, there were 3 science challenges in total, which is of course why I came to this fake volcanic island lair in the first place. If I completed all 3, Professor P would tell me the whereabouts of my missing mentor, Professor Sampson, who went missing years ago. But there was much more to it than that, and more mysteries than I was anticipating. The kidnapping of Bradley and Delores had complicated things, or so Professor P had thought. But the irony was, he had made it that much simpler. It was a sign of desperation. When he sent his top evil science cabal executives, Dapper Science John and Professor Roughhouse, the kidnapping, I knew then, was more for show, which pointed me to the truth. But before I tell you about catching up with newly freed kidnappees Bradley and Delores and finally putting all of the pieces of Professor P's plans together, I want to talk to you about a few things. First of all, we want to thank you for all your support and for being here and listening to our stories. It's much appreciated, and we are warmed by all the wonderful and supportive reviews you've been posting. Also, there are 2 types of shows in the podcast high-speed show feed. There are the regular episodes, such as what you're listening to right now, and Professor Atwood's Sleepscapes to give you more adventures per month. These sleepscapes are pulled directly from my adventures with all the music and sounds we collect on our journeys. We then remix and remaster them and make them longer so you can create your own adventure in your mind as you settle in and drift off to sleep. And as always, don't forget to rate and review the show, and maybe post about the show, as that's how other adventurers find us. And if you want more info, merchandise, and donation and ad-free Patreon subscription options, where you can also get some bonus content and my irregular journals, you can also go to whitecatentertainment.com. All right, let's get back to the story. I had just freed Bradley and Delores and learned that they had pretty much been so relaxed because they not only had faith in me, but Delores had also done a sweep of the kidnapping lounge and found multiple weak points. They could have escaped at any time. But not only did they allow themselves to be captured, thinking that I may need assistance, but they deliberately did not escape as to not jeopardize Science Challenge number 3, which would have been put in dispute if the kidnappees freed themselves without a science challenge being successfully completed. But if they were going to help, they needed the full story, and while I knew time was of the essence, it would do no good not to inform or prepare my team for what may lay ahead. So we took some time to debrief. After another warm hug, it was truly good to see them again, we sat down for a bit in the fake ancient hidden temple, and I brought Delores and Bradley up to speed. I told them all about Professor P, our history, and the science challenges. Bradley especially looked surprised when I told him about my ex-wife Julia's presence, and like myself, didn't know what to make of things. At first, I told them about my submarine, the O2, and about Professor Cook and the WET's propulsion system the Getty Museum had given me. I told them about the connection my wife and Professor P had over neuromorphic engineering, and about Chef Chet, my secret ally, and his cryptic lunch messages, which were mostly, warnings. Bradley went to bring out some snacks from the kidnappee lounge, as this was obviously a large amount of nefarious events to catch up on. I asked if there was a return system for plates and trash, and Bradley said yes. There was a pneumatic refuse system that went straight back to the island volcanic lair, and I thought most likely also back to the kitchen. I excused myself for a moment and threw some of my trash away into the pneumatic tube, along with something else. A note for a friend and ally. I just hoped he would get it in time. I returned to the temple main chamber where Bradley and Delores were waiting, and I continued my story. I told them about the first science challenge and the help from my ex-wife where it was just making a lava lamp. That was a free challenge, essentially, but I totally nailed it with a hybrid lava lamp / aquarium that Professor P took and displayed right in his private chamber. I then mentioned the much more difficult science challenge number 2, where I had to create a hovering personal transport vehicle for Professor P's minions that was also safe to use. Bradley asked if I used a gyroscope along with a wireless power transfer system, and I said, well, of course. He smiled and added that he bet it was fun to use, too. I agreed. It was fun. But the point was to pass the second science challenge, which I did. I also told them about the sabotage to my submarine, the O2, on the way here, and how Professor P told me about their kidnapping over breakfast after he supposedly granted me a, quote, day off between challenges. As I mentioned earlier, and suspected earlier, it was Dapper Science John and Professor Roughhouse who had kidnapped them, along with a small group of minions. And Delores and Bradley had also disliked them instantly, and that wasn't even factoring in the kidnapping. As I mentioned earlier, Delores, as a mercenary, saw them coming a mile away, literally in a helicopter, and had allowed both of them to be captured because they thought I could use the help, which I appreciated. I then talked about cryptanalysis, side channel attacks, and my custom umbrellas, including umbrella number 4, the CPU umbrella, that helped me crack open the digital door lock, a completely random lock with random symbols. I also added in all the distractions and deliberate red herrings Professor P had peppered into his whole affair to keep me off track and off guard. But then, I paused for a moment and took a deep breath. As I finished telling them about everything, I had an epiphany. Interestingly, as it turns out, as I was laying everything all out for Bradley and Delores, I finally began to see the pattern. A pattern deliberately hidden from me until now. And I put it all together, and it painted a picture I did not like at all. I told Bradley and Delores we had to get back to the fake volcanic lair ASAP, and it was about a day's hike from here. I was already behind and far away, which was by evil science villain design, of course, and I hoped I would not be too late. But as I said, I had now pieced it all together. Why now? Which challenges? Every distraction and red herring. It was all by design to prevent me from learning the true intention here. But even now that I knew, would I be in time to stop it? I began packing up and warned Delores and Bradley that we had a long hike ahead of us, and that it would take the better part of the day, and we may even need to finish getting through the jungle by flashlight. There was no time to lose. But Delores and Bradley once again smiled and said that that would not be necessary. There was a quicker way. I stopped for a moment and said that I hadn't seen any other roads or access points to the temple. Delores replied that's because they were hidden. There were underground tunnels forming a utilidor system from the fake volcanic lair to the fake ancient temple. Well, I suppose that made sense. Professor P had set his evil science lair up as a bizarre island science villain theme park, so a series of underground tunnels made sense. But where were they? Delores brought us all back to the kidnapping lounge and said this was escape plan number 3, that they didn't need to use, of course, as they knew I had things well in hand. I appreciated the confidence, but I did add that under normal circumstances, by all means, don't wait for me. Always escape your kidnapping on your own if possible. Delores found a hidden door in the wall and expertly picked the lock with a hairpin and a toothpick. More security and mercenary skills that have once again come in quite handy. The door opened up and we heard a low hum as the lights to the underground tunnel network sprang to life, obviously on a motion detector. There was even a convenient electric golf cart for us to use. As we hopped into the golf cart, I thought about utilidors and transport tunnels. Now, tunnels can be connected together to form a tunnel network. These can be used in mining to reach ore below ground, in cities for underground rapid transit systems, in sewer systems, in warfare to avoid enemy detection or attacks, as maintenance access routes beneath sites with high ground traffic such as airports and amusement parks, or to extend public living areas or commercial access while avoiding outdoor weather. The most famous of these, and of course one of the largest, is in Disney parks and resorts. In Disney theme parks, the utilidor system is a system of some of the world's largest utility tunnels, mainly for Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom in Florida. The utilidors, short for utility corridors, are part of Disney's backstage, meaning the behind-the-scenes area. This allowed Disney's employees, as they're known as cast members there, to perform park support operations such as trash removal, and for costume characters to quickly reach their destinations on the surface out of the sight of guests to avoid ruining the illusion that is being created. These tunnels were first built for Magic Kingdom. Smaller utilidor systems are built under the central section of Epcot's Future World, primarily beneath Spaceship Earth and Innoventions, and formerly at Pleasure Island, which is now the landing section of Disney Springs. Disneyland in California also has a utilidor system running throughout both Magic Kingdom and California Adventure. Now, according to modern legend, Walt Disney was bothered by the sight of a cowboy walking through Disneyland's Tomorrowland en route to his post at Frontierland. He felt that such a sight was jarring and it detracted from the guest experience. Now, this was of course before every franchise overused the concept of a multiverse, in which case a cowboy in Tomorrowland would be right at home. But again, that's really neither here nor there. Anyway, since Disneyland was small when it was first built, such a tunnel system could not be feasibly implemented. When the new Florida Disney park was being planned, engineers designed utilidors to keep park operations out of guests' sight. The largest system of utilidors is beneath Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, but they are not a basement, contrary to popular belief. Because of an elevated water table, most of these tunnels were actually built at ground level, and the Magic Kingdom was built above that. All the guests of the park see streets that are elevated by 1 story. Parts of Fantasyland, including the Cinderella Castle, are at a 3rd-story level. The ground's incline is so gradual that guests tend not to realize they are ascending to the 2nd and 3rd stories. The utilidors are built on 9 acres, and the floor plan is a circle with a path down the middle. The tunnel walls are color-coded to make it simple for cast members to determine their location. The utilidors can be accessed from a main tunnel entrance located behind Fantasyland or through unmarked doors throughout the theme park. Magic Kingdom cast members park about 1 mile away at West Clock parking lot nearby Disney University and are transported from the parking lot to the tunnel entrance via Disney transport buses. Some shops, restaurants, and attractions have direct access to the utilidors. Cast members navigate the tunnels on foot or in battery-powered vehicles that resemble golf carts. Gasoline-powered vehicles are not allowed in the utilidors, with the exception of armored cash pickup trucks and, in extreme emergencies, ambulances. Guests are not allowed in the utilidors unless they purchase the Keys to the Kingdom tour. The utilidors have been referred to as an underground city, the functions of which include waste removal. The Magic Kingdom uses an automated vacuum collection (AVAC) system for waste removal. Custodians remove trash from the park 24 hours a day, then dump it into AVAC system processors throughout the park. The trash then travels through pneumatic tubes to a central location where it is processed and compressed for transfer to a landfill or recycling plant. And I'm sure this is where Professor P got the idea for the Kidnappy Lounge when it connected with a trash refuse system to the fake volcanic island lair. Also, electrical operations. The park's computer system, the Digital Animation Control System, or DAX, is operated and monitored from control rooms in the utilidors. This system monitors everything in the park, from sound systems to attractions, from audio animatronic figures to parades, from fire prevention and security systems to cash registers. Now, delivery and storage warehouses. Deliveries are received, processed, and stored at the utilidors until use. This ensures that guests do not see delivery trucks, nor do they see cast members carting merchandise through the park. Food service. The park's cooking and prep kitchens are housed in the utilidors. Costuming. For years, the park's costuming department, for cast members and audio animatronic figures, was located in the utilidors. Over 1.2 million costumes were housed here, making it the largest operating wardrobe department in the world. In 2005, Disney replaced this facility with a larger location in the cast members' parking lot, West Clock. The only costuming operation that remain in the utilidors today are for costumed characters. Cast member services. Separate locker rooms for men and women are located in the utilidors, as well as cast member cafeterias. There is also a credit union and an employee hair salon called Kingdom Cutters, rehearsal rooms, and administrative offices. Now, as we drove down the utilidor from the fake temple to the fake volcano, lights continued to spring to life as we went. The Infinite Science Cabal's utilidor system was much more modest, obviously. There seemed to be just the main corridor for transport between the faked ancient temple ruins and the fake volcanic lair, but there was also a couple of break rooms, some maintenance bays, and there was a costume department housing various Minion and Science villain uniforms and some Mardi Gras costumes, which must have been used for special occasions. Anyway, I was more hopeful now, as I would be able to get back to Professor P and his evil volcanic science lair in a fraction of the time it took me to get to the ruins, hiking through the jungle. Now, this was much less scenic, obviously, but a lot more efficient. We soon came to a branching tunnel. It looked like these tunnels weren't just for transport to and from the fake ancient temple now, but to various areas within the volcanic lair too, for the minions to save some time. Interesting. I remember that I'd only seen a small portion of the volcanic lair, and my movement was quite restricted to science challenge business, and that was pretty much it, so it didn't surprise me that there were more branches, because there's probably plenty of the lair that I had not seen. We soon approached 3 branches. One went to the beach, one went to the evil main/hall/throne room, or whatever the heck Professor P was calling it today. The sign looked new, and there was a discarded one in the trash. The main throne room one was on the wall, and evil control room was in the trash. Now, if the minions were smarter, they'd just have a closet full of signs and rotate them in and out instead of having to make a new one every time Professor P's mood changed. But it was the 3rd tunnel branch that interested me the most. That led to the submarine dock. I told Bradley to drive us there. Both he and Delores asked me if I was sure, and wouldn't it be better to confront Professor P in the, we checked the sign, main throne room? I said no. The submarine dock was where everyone would be. I was sure of it. Bradley never second-guessed me. Well, let's be honest, he shouldn't. But I didn't have time to explain everything I had figured out just yet. We covered a lot on the debrief at the temple, but there was more. Anyway, I just needed to get there as soon as possible. I told Bradley to floor it. Okay, well, that doesn't do a lot on a golf cart, but it looked like we went a little faster, but that may have been psychological. As we raced, relatively speaking, down the utilidor corridor, I wondered about how I was going to stop Professor P. I wondered if Chef Chet, my mysterious ally, had received my note, and I wondered about my ex-wife Julia, as she was firmly in the middle of all this, but I knew now that it wasn't her fault. I had suspected that was the case for a while, but now I was sure. I was sure about a lot of things now, and the obfuscation Professor P engaged in to keep me in a nebulous cloud of uncertainty had lifted. And to be honest, I was quite irritated about the whole affair. Now, I get that he's my evil science nemesis and all, but I don't like being manipulated, and he made it a bit too personal, which ironically helped me put it all together. That's why we were headed to the submarine dock and not his, quote, main throne room. We were almost there. Bradley and Delores asked me why the submarine dock. I said because my submarine, the O2, was there, with a special hybrid wets propulsion system from the Getty Museum. Bradley asked how Professor Cook was, and I said fine, and she also hoped I could find my missing mentor, Professor Sampson, as they were romantically involved a while back. Bradley nodded and said my submarine should be safe due to my custom random encryption locking system. He paused for a moment. Oh, he said. He and Delores were starting to put it together as well. But they only had a few pieces of the puzzle. I had most of them now. I could see the full troubling picture, but there were still a few corner pieces that were eluding me. Still, I was confident that would all change very soon. We'd almost reached the submarine dock, and we started to hear the sounds of large-scale activity, from minions shouting and rushing around to what sounded like a large winch. I wasn't sure if I would be in time or not. Bradley drove the electric cart down the utilidor, and it opened up to the submarine dock, and what was happening there was even a bit worse than I had imagined. It was a lot to take in, and I heard Delores gasp, something she never does, as she's rarely surprised, even in space or on Mars, but this time she was. I'll start by saying my submarine, the O2, was indeed still there, but fully breached with the hatch open and the wet propulsion system from the Getty Museum on a winch and moving towards the biggest submarine I had ever seen. It even had a deck for takeoff vehicles like an aircraft carrier, and that's when I knew all of my theories were indeed correct. The submarine was even bigger than the Russian Typhoon-class submarine, which up until now was the largest submarine ever built. And those were so big they had swimming pools and golf courses on them. Now, I know that sounds fanciful, but it was true. Now, the Typhoon was a class of nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines designed and built by the Soviet Union for the Soviet Navy. With a submerged displacement of 48,000 tons, Typhoons were the largest submarines ever built, able to accommodate comfortably living facilities for the crew of 160 when submerged for several months. The origin of the nickname Typhoon remains a little unclear, although it is often claimed to be related to the use of the word typhoon by General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev of the Communist Party in a 1974 speech while describing a new type of nuclear ballistic missile submarine as a reaction to the United States Navy's new Ohio-class submarine. Now, Typhoon-class submarines featured multiple pressure hulls, which simplifies internal design while making the vessel much wider than a normal submarine. In the main body of the sub, two long pressure hulls lie parallel with a third, smaller pressure hull above them. That protrudes just below the sail, and two other pressure hulls for torpedoes and steering gear. This also greatly increases their survivability. Even if one pressure hull is breached, the crew members in the other are safe and there is less potential for flooding. Its ballistic missiles were placed between the two main pressure hulls, their launch tubes enclosed only by the outer light hull. But the point was, they were made for combat, and Professor P was taking the design one step further. Anyway, 6 Typhoon-class submarines were built between 1976 and 1985. However, in September of 2011, the Russian Defense Ministry decided to write off all Typhoon-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines until 2014. The reasons for decommissioning the Typhoon-class vessels were the restrictions imposed on Russia by the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty and the successful trials of the new Borei-class submarine, which was smaller and could operate with a smaller crew, like 107 as opposed to 160. Now, I'm not sure about the swimming pools and the golf courses, of course. But in 2023, it was reported that the last Typhoon-class submarine, the Dmitry Donskoy, was decommissioned. But clearly, Professor P had gotten his hands on the blueprints and had built something even bigger. And I knew what that flat runway platform at the top was for as well. It was then that Professor P noticed us. He was supervising everything, with Julia at his side as Dapper Science John and Professor Roughhouse continued their work of stealing my custom submarine propulsion system. Professor P gave me a wicked smile and said I was early, but he should have guessed I would find the Utilidor. And he scolded a minion supervisor next to him for leaving a fully charged electric cart by the fake temple ruins Utilidor entrance as well. "So, Professor Atwood," Professor P said condescendingly, "you figured out my plan." "I did," I replied, and I said confidently, "I'm here to thwart you." Professor P laughed and said he would like to see that. And I will tell you all about Professor P's plans and my plan to thwart those plans next time. But before I end this evening's story, I want to talk to you about something. The big picture. Sometimes we get so focused we don't see the forest for the trees, as the saying goes. But it can get more complicated if your science villain nemesis is deliberately hiding that forest from you. But I'm hoping for most of you listening that's not the case. Anyway, the point is, you have to take that step back. Pieces never fit together properly when you're staring right at them. They need context. They need each other. They need the whole puzzle. And then when you have that position of height above the issues and the challenges ahead of you, you see that those problem puzzle pieces are smaller than you originally thought, and that you can find how they fit together. So whenever you seem to have a challenge that makes no sense, take a step back, review your pieces, put that puzzle together. And as long as the picture revealed isn't one of a giant assault submarine, you'll be all right. Good night, adventurers.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.